It was a quiet afternoon in a small city. The streets were busy with people going about their daily lives, but one corner of the city often went unnoticed. That corner near the church had its own world, a place where the homeless and the struggling tried to survive. Among them was a young boy no older than 12. His clothes were torn and dirty, his shoes worn thin. His hair was unkempt and his eyes carried a sadness that made him look far older than his age. He wandered the streets alone, searching for scraps of food, leftover coins, or anyone who might spare a little kindness that day. He sat on the cold pavement outside the church, hunched over, trying to shield himself from the passing crowd. People hurried past, avoiding his gaze, not noticing him at all. The boy had grown used to being invisible. Life had not been kind to him. He had no family left, and the streets had become his home. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but it was nothing compared to the loneliness he felt. Every day was a fight to survive, a struggle to find even the smallest moments of comfort in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. Inside the church, the pastor was finishing up his afternoon duties. He was a kind-hearted man, always ready to help anyone in need. His life had been full of challenges too, but he believed that kindness and faith could change lives. As he stepped outside, he noticed the boy sitting quietly on the pavement. Something about the boy's posture, the way he seemed so small and lost, caught the pastor's attention. He walked over slowly, not wanting to scare the boy. "Hello, young man," he said gently. The boy flinched at the sound of the voice, his eyes widening. He wasn't used to strangers speaking to him kindly. Most people either ignored him or shouted at him to move along. The pastor knelt down to the boy's level, smiling warmly. "Are you hungry?" he asked. The boy hesitated. His pride and fear battled with his need, but the hunger in his stomach was stronger. He nodded silently. The pastor reached into his bag and pulled out a small paper bag filled with food. "Here, take this. It's not much, but it will help," he said. The boy looked at the food, then at the pastor, unsure if he should trust him. But the kindness in the man's eyes convinced him. He slowly took the bag and opened it, revealing sandwiches and fruit. He ate quickly, hungrily, savoring every bite as if it were the best meal he had ever had. The pastor watched quietly, giving the boy space. When the boy finished, he asked gently, "Where are you staying tonight?" The boy's eyes fell to the ground. I don't have anywhere," he admitted softly. Without hesitation, the pastor stood and offered his hand. "Come with me," he said. "I can help you." The boy looked at the hand, then at the pastor, unsure. Trust did not come easily to him. But something about the man made him want to believe. Slowly, he placed his small hand in the pastor's and they walked together to the church. Inside, the church was warm and inviting. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the floor. The smell of fresh bread from the kitchen mixed with the scent of flowers and candles. The boy had never been inside a place like this before. He looked around, his eyes wide with wonder, taking in the peaceful atmosphere. The pastor led him to a small room with a bed, clean sheets, and a few blankets. "This will be your place for tonight," he said. "You can stay as long as you need." The boy sat on the bed, overwhelmed by the comfort and warmth. No one had ever offered him anything like this before. He wanted to speak, to thank the man, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and disbelief. Over the next few days, the pastor continued to help the boy. He provided him with clothes, food, and a safe place to sleep. More importantly, he offered something the boy had never experienced before: attention, care, and encouragement. The pastor asked about the boy's life, listened patiently to his story, and reassured him that it was not his fault that life had been so hard. The boy began to open up. He spoke about losing his parents, about nights spent alone in cold alleyways, about the fear of being forgotten. The pastor listened without judgment, offering comfort and hope. He told the boy that everyone deserves a chance to start over, that no matter what had happened in the past, the future could be different. The boy had never felt hope before, and the pastor's words planted a tiny seed in his heart. It wasn't easy. The boy had learned to survive on the streets, and old habits and fears didn't disappear overnight. He sometimes tried to sneak out, thinking he could handle the streets on his own, but the pastor always noticed and gently guided him back. He taught the boy small lessons about trust, responsibility, and respect. Slowly, the boy began to learn that he could rely on someone, that he didn't have to face the world alone anymore. The pastor also encouraged the boy to start attending school again. At first, the boy resisted, afraid of being laughed at or falling behind. But the pastor promised to help him every step of the way. He connected the boy with a teacher who could tutor him and made arrangements for transportation so he could attend classes safely. The boy's first day back at school was filled with nervous excitement. He was shy and quiet, but for the first time he felt like he belonged somewhere. Days turned into weeks and the boy's life began to change. He still faced challenges and he still had moments of doubt and fear. But now he had someone who believed in him, someone who would not give up on him. The pastor's consistent support helped him see that his life could be more than just survival. He could dream, hope, and even plan for a future he had never imagined before. One evening, as the boy sat by the church window watching the sunset, the pastor joined him. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing to the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. "Every day can be like that, full of new possibilities. You've already come so far, and this is just the beginning." The boy looked at the colors, then at the pastor, and a small smile appeared on his face. It was a smile that carried gratitude, trust, and something he hadn't felt in a long time: joy. That night, the boy lay in the warm bed thinking about the day. He realized that he had never known anyone like the pastor, someone who cared so deeply without expecting anything in return. For the first time, he felt safe. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that life could be better. And for the first time, he dreamed of a future where he wasn't just surviving, but thriving. The boy didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He had found someone who believed in him, someone who had changed his life in ways he could not yet fully understand. And in that quiet church, with the soft glow of the lamps and the gentle hum of evening prayers, a bond was formed, a bond that would grow stronger over the years, shaping both their lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The first part of this story ends here, but it marks the beginning of a journey of trust, growth, and transformation, a journey that shows how one act of kindness can light up the darkest moments of someone's life. The boy, once lost and invisible, now had hope, guidance, and a place to call home, all because of a pastor who saw the potential in him and refused to let him be forgotten. After a few weeks of staying at the church, the boy began to settle into a routine. Each morning, he would wake up in the warm bed the pastor had prepared for him. The sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows painted colorful patterns across the floor, and for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of belonging. Breakfast at the church kitchen was now part of his day, and the smell of freshly baked bread and hot porridge made him feel comforted. The pastor encouraged him to attend school, and slowly the boy began to go. At first, he was nervous and quiet, unsure how to speak to other children. He worried that they would make fun of him, or that he wouldn't be able to keep up with their lessons. But the pastor reassured him, telling him that learning was a journey and that everyone could improve with patience and effort. One step at a time, the pastor would say with a gentle smile. At school, the boy struggled at first. Writing sentences, reading aloud, and doing math felt difficult, but he had never had anyone patiently teach him before. Now, with the help of a teacher arranged by the pastor and encouragement from the pastor himself, he began to improve. Each small success gave him a little more confidence. When he could read a whole paragraph without stumbling, his chest would swell with pride. When he solved a math problem correctly, he would look at the pastor as if to say, "See, I can do it." And the pastor always responded with a warm, encouraging nod, telling him he was proud. The boy also began to help around the church. He learned small tasks like sweeping the floor, organizing donations, and assisting in the kitchen. At first, he felt clumsy and unsure, but the pastor guided him gently. "Everyone has a role," the pastor said. "Even the smallest help makes a big difference." Slowly, the boy discovered a sense of purpose. For the first time, he felt needed, not just invisible or forgotten. Evenings at the church were special. The pastor would often sit with the boy and talk about life. He shared stories from his own past, about struggles he had faced and how he overcame them. He told the boy that life was not always fair, but people could make choices that would change their path. The boy listened closely, soaking in every word. These conversations planted seeds of hope, patience, and courage in his heart. He began to dream, thinking about a future where he could be more than just a boy surviving on the streets. Yet, the boy still faced challenges. Old habits of fear and mistrust sometimes returned. He would have moments when he doubted whether he could really change, when he wondered if this kindness was real or just temporary. There were nights when he sneaked out, tempted to return to the streets where he had once felt free, even if unsafe. But the pastor never scolded him. Instead, he would quietly wait for the boy to return and speak to him with patience. "It's okay to feel afraid," he said. "But remember, you don't have to face the world alone." Through these experiences, the boy learned something important. He learned that trust could be earned slowly and that it was okay to accept help. He discovered that small steps repeated day by day could lead to big changes. He learned that being responsible for something, his own growth, his studies, and the small tasks at the church, gave him a sense of strength he had never known before. The pastor also introduced the boy to the church's community. Other people who were kind and willing to help began to notice him. Some offered tutoring, some shared meals, and some just smiled and greeted him warmly. For the boy, these simple gestures felt extraordinary. He began to understand that there were people in the world who genuinely cared about others, not for what they could gain, but simply to help. This realization changed him slowly but deeply. One rainy afternoon, the boy faced a particularly tough moment. He had been struggling with his schoolwork and felt that he wasn't improving fast enough. He sat in the church hall staring out at the rain dripping down the windows and whispered, "Maybe I'm not good enough." The pastor came and sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You are good enough," he said softly. "It's not about being perfect. It's about trying, learning, and never giving up. Every day you try, you grow a little stronger." The boy nodded, taking in the words. He realized that failure was not something to fear, but something to learn from. He began to approach his schoolwork differently, trying new ways to understand difficult subjects, asking questions when he was confused, and slowly seeing improvement. Each small success felt like a victory, not just in school, but in life. As months passed, the boy's confidence grew. He could speak more easily with others, share his thoughts, and even smile without fear of being judged. He started to make friends at school, children who were curious about him and welcomed him into their games and activities. For the first time, he experienced friendship, trust, and laughter. These new experiences built a sense of normalcy he had never known on the streets. Despite all these positive changes, the boy never forgot the struggles he had faced. He remembered the hunger, the cold nights, and the fear of being alone. And he never forgot the pastor who had seen him when no one else did. This memory became a source of gratitude and motivation. He wanted to make the pastor proud, to show that the help he received had not gone in vain. The pastor, meanwhile, continued to guide the boy gently. He taught him about values like honesty, kindness, and responsibility. He spoke about helping others, giving back, and living a life of purpose. The boy absorbed these lessons, sometimes repeating them quietly to himself as if trying to memorize them for the future. He realized that the pastor's guidance was not just about surviving the present, but about building a future he could be proud of. One special evening, the pastor took the boy to a nearby park. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and the boy felt a sense of peace he had never known. The pastor spoke about dreams, hard work, and the importance of never losing hope. He told the boy, "You have a life ahead of you. You can be anything you want to be, but remember, always stay true to yourself and never forget where you came from." The boy listened silently, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. The future seemed big and unknown, but for the first time it also felt possible. He began to understand that his life did not have to be defined by the streets or by his past struggles. He could choose a different path, one where he could grow, succeed, and even help others someday. Back at the church, the boy continued to thrive. He helped other children in the community, assisted with chores, and began to take pride in his own growth. People noticed the change in him, the way he walked with confidence, spoke with clarity, and treated others with respect. The pastor's efforts were paying off, and the boy was blossoming into a young person full of potential and hope. Yet there was one thing the boy carried quietly in his heart: gratitude. He wanted to one day repay the kindness that had saved him. The thought of helping the pastor or giving back in some way became a quiet dream he held close. He didn't yet know how it would happen, but the desire to show his appreciation grew stronger with each passing day. The days and weeks that followed were filled with learning, laughter, and small victories. The boy faced challenges, of course, but he now had tools to overcome them. He had patience, determination, and most importantly, someone who believed in him. The pastor had not just given him shelter and food, he had given him hope, confidence, and the knowledge that he mattered. And so life at the church continued day by day, lesson by lesson, moment by moment. The boy's heart began to heal, his spirit began to rise, and the seeds of a brighter future were planted. He no longer feared the world. He faced it with cautious optimism and a newfound sense of purpose. He knew that the road ahead would be long, but for the first time he believed he could walk it, and maybe one day, even run. The bond between the boy and the pastor grew stronger with every passing day. It was a bond built not just on kindness but on trust, patience, and shared dreams. And though the boy's journey had just begun, the lessons he learned during these early days would shape him for the rest of his life. He was no longer just a boy surviving on the streets. He was a boy learning to live, to hope, and to dream. Time passed, and the boy grew taller, stronger, and more confident. He was no longer the scared child who had wandered the streets, unsure if he would survive the night. Instead, he had started to dream about the future, a future that seemed bigger and brighter with each passing day. His days were filled with school, helping at the church, and learning new things from the pastor. The guidance he received had slowly transformed him. He could now read and write better than most children his age. He understood the importance of hard work, and he had learned to trust people again. The pastor saw the boy's potential and wanted him to aim higher. "You can do more than you think," the pastor said one afternoon while they walked through the quiet streets near the church. "There is a bigger world outside these streets, and one day you will need to see it for yourself." The boy listened carefully, absorbing the words. He wanted to believe them, but the idea of leaving the only place he had ever felt safe made him anxious. As the boy entered his teenage years, the pastor began to discuss possibilities for the future. He explained that education could open doors, that learning new skills could help him stand on his own feet, and that the world was full of opportunities for those willing to work for them. The boy had always been a hard worker, but now he began to understand that hard work combined with knowledge could change his life. The pastor helped him apply for a scholarship to a better school in a nearby town. This was a turning point. The boy was nervous. Leaving the church meant leaving the pastor's immediate guidance and the safety he had grown used to. But the pastor reassured him, "I am proud of you. This is your chance to grow, to explore, and to see how strong you have become. I will always be here for you." The day he left for the new school was emotional. The pastor walked him to the bus station, carrying a small bag with essentials and a few personal items. The boy looked at the pastor, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. He had never been away from the church for more than a few hours, and now he was venturing into a completely new world. The pastor smiled gently, sensing his nervousness. "Remember what you've learned. Be brave, be kind, and never forget where you came from." On the bus ride, the boy stared out the window. The familiar streets disappeared, replaced by new sights, buildings, and people. Everything seemed different, bigger, and overwhelming. But at the same time, he felt a spark of hope. He had survived so much already. He could handle this. He reminded himself of the pastor's words and took a deep breath, preparing for the journey ahead. School life was challenging at first. The boy was shy and hesitant to speak to classmates. Some of them came from families that had never known the struggles he had faced. They talked about vacations, technology, and hobbies he had never experienced. At first he felt out of place, but he remembered the lessons from the pastor: patience, courage, and persistence. He began to ask questions, try to participate in class, and slowly, people started noticing his intelligence and kindness. One day, a teacher noticed how hard he was working and pulled him aside. "You have potential," she said kindly. "I can see that you are determined. Keep studying and you will go far." Those words were small, but they carried immense weight for the boy. For the first time, he felt recognized for his effort, for the person he was becoming. The boy also began to make a few friends. Not many, but a small circle of classmates who accepted him for who he was. They didn't care about his past, his clothes, or his background. They saw a young man trying his best, and that was enough. These friendships were important because they gave him a sense of belonging outside the church and showed him that he could fit in the world beyond the streets. Despite his new life, the boy never forgot the pastor. He wrote letters, visited whenever he could, and often spoke about him to his new friends. He wanted them to understand that his success so far was not just his own doing. It was because someone had believed in him when no one else did. The pastor's influence remained strong in every decision he made and in every step he took toward independence. Life was not without its challenges. There were nights when he felt lonely, when he missed the comfort of the church and the quiet guidance of the pastor. There were exams that seemed impossible, projects that drained his energy, and moments when he doubted his ability to succeed. But each time he faced a setback, he remembered the pastor's words. Every step forward, no matter how small, is progress. Don't give up. These words became a mantra, guiding him through obstacles and keeping him focused on his goals. The boy also had to learn to manage responsibilities on his own. At school, he had homework, assignments, and social obligations. Outside, he had to manage his finances carefully, saving money for necessities while still trying to live modestly. These lessons were difficult, but they taught him independence and self-reliance. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be responsible for himself, to make choices that could shape his future. Over the years, his hard work began to pay off. He improved academically, earning good grades and recognition from teachers. He participated in small projects and community activities, trying to give back in small ways just as the pastor had taught him. Each success boosted his confidence and each challenge made him stronger. He started to believe that one day he could truly repay the kindness he had received. Even as he grew more independent, the boy maintained a strong connection with the pastor. They wrote letters, spoke on the phone, and visited whenever possible. During these conversations, the pastor continued to give advice, encouragement, and reminders of the values he had instilled in the boy. They spoke about dreams, goals, and the importance of helping others. The boy listened carefully, knowing that these lessons would guide him not just through school but through life. The boy also began to think seriously about his future career. He wanted to do something meaningful, something that would allow him to help others as he had been helped. He considered fields like teaching, social work, or community service. He knew that success wasn't just about money or recognition. It was about making a positive impact. The desire to repay the pastor's kindness became a guiding force in his decisions. During holidays, the boy would sometimes return to the church. He loved walking through the familiar halls, feeling the comfort of the old rooms, and speaking with the pastor face to face. These visits reminded him of how far he had come. He could now look at the boy he once was, the scared, lonely child, and feel proud of the young man he was becoming. Each visit reinforced his commitment to work hard, succeed, and one day give back. One particular visit stands out. The boy had saved a small amount of money from part-time work and brought it to the pastor. "I want to help," he said shyly, handing the money over. The pastor smiled, gently refusing the gift at first, but the boy insisted. "It's not much, but I want to start giving back even in a small way," he explained. The pastor's eyes glistened with pride. He realized that the boy had truly understood the meaning of kindness and gratitude. He was no longer just receiving. He was beginning to give. As time passed, the boy's confidence and maturity grew. He became a role model for younger children at the church, offering guidance, support, and encouragement. The boy who had once been lost on the streets was now a source of hope for others. He demonstrated that with patience, hard work, and the support of someone who believes in you, it was possible to overcome even the harshest challenges. By the end of this period, the boy was on the path to independence. He was preparing to leave the town for higher education, determined to build a career and a life that could honor the sacrifices and guidance of the pastor. He knew it would not be easy. Life would still have obstacles, disappointments, and hard choices, but he also knew that he was no longer alone, that he had the skills, values, and determination to face whatever came his way. The journey from a scared, hungry child to a confident, determined young man was remarkable, and throughout this journey one constant remained: the pastor's unwavering belief in him. That belief had shaped his choices, inspired his growth, and planted in him the desire to one day give back, to repay the kindness that had changed his life forever. Part 3 closes with the boy standing at the edge of a new chapter. He was ready to leave the familiar streets and the church that had nurtured him, stepping into a larger world full of possibilities. He carried with him the lessons of resilience, trust, and gratitude, determined to honor the person who had once saved him. not just with words, but with actions that could touch lives, just as his life had been touched. Leaving the church and the town he had grown up in was both exciting and frightening for the young man. He had spent so many years under the guidance of the pastor, learning, growing, and healing from the hardships of his early life. Now, stepping into a larger city to continue his education and start working, he felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew that success would not come easily, but he also knew that he had the tools and values the pastor had taught him to face life head-on. The city was busy, loud, and overwhelming at first. Tall buildings cast long shadows over the streets, and people rushed past without noticing anyone else. The young man felt a pang of loneliness as he realized that the safety and warmth of the church were now miles away. But he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned: courage, patience, and persistence. He took a deep breath, focusing on the opportunities ahead rather than the fears that tried to hold him back. His days became full of study, part-time work, and learning to manage his own life. College classes were difficult, and he often struggled to keep up with students who had grown up with more resources and guidance. But he refused to give up. He spent late nights reading, practicing, and reviewing lessons, sometimes working long hours after class to earn enough money for rent and food. Each challenge strengthened his resolve. He remembered the pastor's words: "Every small step forward is progress. Keep moving, no matter how hard it gets." While studying and working, the young man faced moments of doubt and loneliness. There were nights when he felt tired, frustrated, and unsure if he could succeed. He missed the comfort of the church, the kind eyes of the pastor, and the sense of belonging he had once felt. But in those moments, he would recall the encouragement he had received over the years. The pastor's belief in him, the trust he had earned, and the values he had been taught became a source of strength. He learned to speak to himself with patience and kindness, just as the pastor had taught him. One of the most important lessons he learned during this time was the value of perseverance. He encountered professors who were strict and classmates who were competitive. Sometimes assignments seemed impossible, and exams felt like insurmountable obstacles. But instead of giving up, he reminded himself of his past struggles. He had survived hunger, loneliness, and fear. This was difficult, yes, but not impossible. Slowly, through consistent effort, he began to see results. He started scoring higher on exams, completing projects with care, and earning recognition from teachers. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced his confidence and determination. The young man also learned the importance of time management. Balancing school, work, and personal growth was not easy, but it taught him discipline. He planned his days carefully, prioritizing tasks and ensuring he dedicated time to studying, working, and taking care of himself. He learned to rest when needed, to ask for help when necessary, and to focus on progress rather than perfection. These skills would later prove invaluable in his career and personal life. During this time, he also developed a sense of empathy and responsibility toward others. Having experienced hardship himself, he noticed those around him who struggled. He offered help to classmates who were falling behind, shared advice with friends who faced challenges, and even volunteered occasionally at local shelters. Helping others gave him a sense of fulfillment. It reminded him of the pastor, who had taught him that kindness and compassion were not just for the fortunate, but for everyone who could make a difference. Financial struggles remained a constant challenge. The young man had to work long hours at part-time jobs to cover tuition, rent, and daily expenses. Sometimes he felt exhausted, but he refused to give up. He remembered the pastor's teachings about hard work and resilience. He learned to budget carefully, save whenever possible, and make sacrifices for the sake of his goals. Every dollar earned felt like a step closer to independence, stability, and the ability to one day repay the kindness he had received. Relationships and social connections also played a role in shaping him. He formed friendships with people who shared his values of honesty, hard work, and compassion. These friends became a support system, offering encouragement, advice, and companionship. At the same time, he learned to navigate conflicts and differences with patience and understanding. The young man realized that life was not just about personal success, but also about building meaningful connections and learning from others. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at school, he received a letter from the pastor. The words inside brought tears to his eyes. The pastor wrote about how proud he was about the growth he had witnessed, and about the importance of continuing to live with integrity and compassion. Reading the letter, the young man felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that all the struggles, late nights, and sacrifices were part of a journey that was bigger than just his own success. He wanted to honor the pastor by becoming the best version of himself. Over the months, the young man's efforts began to pay off. He received high marks, earned scholarships for his dedication, and gained recognition from teachers and peers. These achievements were milestones, proof that his hard work and perseverance were creating tangible results. But more importantly, they were proof to himself that he could rise above his past struggles and build a life of meaning and purpose. During this time, he also started thinking seriously about his future career. He wanted to choose a path that would allow him to help others, just as he had been helped. He explored different fields, including social work, community programs, and education. He realized that true success was not measured by money alone, but by the ability to positively impact lives. This insight became a guiding principle for the decisions he made, shaping his studies, his work, and his interactions with others. Even with his growing independence, he never forgot the pastor. He continued to write letters, call occasionally, and visit when possible. Every conversation reminded him of the foundation of trust, guidance, and kindness that had shaped him. The pastor's influence was like a quiet compass, guiding his choices and decisions even from afar. The young man understood that the person who had once given him food, shelter, and encouragement had done far more than provide temporary relief. He had given him the tools to build a full and meaningful life. The young man also began to save money with a new purpose: to give back. He wanted to repay the pastor in some way, to show that the kindness and guidance he had received had not been forgotten. Even small amounts set aside each month felt significant. He planned carefully, thinking of ways he could support the church, its programs, and the people who had helped him along the way. This sense of purpose became a constant motivator, driving him to work harder and stay focused on his goals. During this period, he faced setbacks too. There were times when a project failed, when he struggled with finances, or when personal challenges weighed heavily on him. But each time he reminded himself of where he had come from. He had survived far greater difficulties. With patience, determination, and the lessons from the pastor, he overcame obstacles one by one. Every success, no matter how small, reinforced his belief in himself and in the power of persistence. In addition to personal growth, he began to understand the importance of leadership. At school and work, he took small initiatives to guide others, help organize tasks, and mentor those who were struggling. He realized that leadership was not about authority or recognition. It was about responsibility, compassion, and helping others succeed. This realization deepened his understanding of the pastor's teachings and inspired him to think about the long-term impact he could have on others. By the end of this period, the young man had achieved a level of stability he had never imagined possible. He was doing well academically, managing his finances, and gaining confidence in his abilities. He had a clear vision of his future, one that involved helping others and making a meaningful difference. But more than that, he had grown emotionally and morally. The lessons from the pastor, the importance of kindness, persistence, and gratitude had become ingrained in him, shaping not just what he did, but who he had become. Part 4 closes with the young man standing at the threshold of success. He had navigated the challenges of independence, education, and work, emerging stronger, wiser, and ready to take on the next stage of his journey. Though life still held uncertainties, he faced them with courage, determination, and a deep sense of gratitude for the pastor who had once changed his life. He was now prepared to step into the future, carrying the values, lessons, and dreams that would guide him toward achieving both personal success and the ability to give back to the world. Years had passed since the young man had left the small town and the church that had been his sanctuary. Life had been full of challenges, hard work, and perseverance, but he had finally reached a place where he felt confident, independent, and capable. He had completed his education, established a career, and achieved a level of stability he had only dreamed of when he was a child living on the streets. Yet, no matter how much he had accomplished, one thought stayed with him constantly: the pastor who had believed in him when no one else did. The young man decided it was time. It was time to return, to show gratitude, and to give back in the way he had always wanted. He wanted to see the pastor again, to tell him about the life he had built and to repay the kindness that had changed everything for him. He packed a small bag, but inside it carried not just belongings but the memories, lessons, and dreams he had nurtured over the years. The journey back to the town was filled with anticipation and nervousness. He wondered what the pastor would think, whether he would even recognize him, and how the church had changed. When he arrived, the sight of the familiar streets brought a rush of memories. The small shops, the cobblestone roads, and the park near the church all felt the same, yet different. Time had moved forward, but the essence of the town, the quiet charm and sense of community, remained. As he walked toward the church, his heart beat faster. The building stood as it always had, warm and welcoming, with sunlight streaming through its stained glass windows. He paused for a moment, taking it all in, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and excitement. As he entered the church courtyard, he saw the pastor tending to a small garden, just as he remembered him years ago. The pastor was older now. His hair had turned gray and lines had formed on his face, but his eyes, kind and wise, remained the same. The young man approached slowly, unsure if he should call out or wait. The pastor looked up and his eyes widened slightly, recognizing the figure standing before him. "Is it really you?" he asked, his voice filled with surprise and warmth. The young man smiled a little nervously. "Yes, it's me," he replied softly. I wanted to come back and see you." The pastor set down his tools and walked toward him. They stood facing each other for a moment, taking in the years that had passed, the changes and the growth. Then, without a word, the pastor pulled him into a warm embrace. It was a hug that spoke of love, pride, and the bond that had never faded. They sat together in the church hall, talking for hours. The young man shared his journey, the struggles, the late nights of studying, the jobs he had worked, and the achievements he had earned. He spoke of the lessons he had learned, the friendships he had formed, and the values he had held on to, all shaped by the pastor's guidance. The pastor listened attentively, his eyes glistening with pride. Every word the young man spoke was a testament to the years of effort, courage, and persistence he had put into building a life worth living. Finally, the young man reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I want to give you this," he said. "It's not just money. It's a way to help the church, the programs, and the work you do for others. You changed my life, and I want to help you change the lives of many more." The pastor looked at the envelope, surprised and touched. He gently pushed it away at first, shaking his head. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "Seeing you succeed is enough." The young man smiled, understanding, but insisted, "I want to do this. It's my way of saying thank you. You believed in me when no one else did. You gave me hope, guidance, and a future. I want to give back." The pastor's eyes filled with tears, and he finally accepted the envelope. It wasn't about the money. It was about the recognition, the gratitude, and the cycle of kindness that had come full circle. In the following days, the young man began helping the church in various ways. He worked on community programs, supported children who were struggling, and shared his story to inspire hope. He tutored kids who needed help with schoolwork, guided young people facing challenges, and participated in initiatives to provide food, clothing, and shelter to those in need. The church had always been a place of warmth and support, but with the young man's help, its reach expanded even further. Every day, he reflected on the journey he had taken. He remembered the nights he had slept on the streets, the fear he had felt, and the moments of despair that had once seemed endless. And he remembered the pastor, whose unwavering belief had shown him a different way. That belief had been more powerful than any challenge, more sustaining than any hardship, and more